Hey guys, it's Curtis of Bear Paw Pets. I wanted to do a little bit of a video today on pets that people think are great until they realize kind of what they're going to turn into. The fish that I'm looking at right now, my Colombian cat, they're not quite in this category, but they're pretty close. And for fish, they call them tank busters. And what a tank buster is a fish that gets so big that they're hard to have in regular tanks. For example, these guys will eventually get big enough they will have to be moved to a 100+ gallon tank, which I am expecting and planning on. The problem is that they display these at pet stores and then they don't tell you that they get huge, and they look so cool swimming around at this size, but you just don't realize that they turn into these monsters. And even worse than that is if I left these guys in here with these platies, well, these are all moving anyway, but if I were to leave them in here, they would eat the platies. They'd eat the platies, the babies, everything. There would be very few survivors coming out of here. So that's kind of what I want to discuss today. It's not just fish. Snakes are the same way, lizards, even some animals. One thing that people have trouble realizing, sorry about the algae, can't see today, is that these fish get big, for one, and they also live for quite a bit of time. The life expectancy for this fish is about 10 to 15 years, though there have been reports of it longer. And they get 13 inches and have been known to get bigger. So people need to realize what they're getting into. I knew that I was getting a bigger fish, and I have prepared for it. The biggest thing that you can do to help yourself so that you don't have fish that are too large for your aquariums is do your research. The biggest issue I had is the way they were labeled where I went. They had them labeled under one of their pseudonyms, which is a silver-tip shark, which is fine. When I went to look them up, it came up as a Colombian shark. You know, Colombian sharks I knew got larger, so I did the research on them. I found out how big they are and kind of what I need to expect. What I need to expect in the future. And from what I understand, these fish will probably double or triple in size within 6 months, which is alright. I still have room or tanks that will fit them. I do eventually have to get a larger tank, which I'm planning on anyways. So my tank is filthy. But this isn't the only one that I have that is considered a tank buster. Let's go over here, see if he's out. Alright, he's out, but I don't know how long he's going to last. This is Monstro. He is my common pleco. Right now I'd say he's probably about 9 inches long. Maybe just short of that. And he's probably about 3 inches tall when his fin is up. He is a monster, and he is growing quite quickly now that he's in a larger aquarium. He's in a 50 gallon. He was in a 29. He's a common pleco. Common plecos are well documented as getting to up to 2 feet or more. The biggest issue with this guy is when I purchased him, I did not know that he was going to turn into a monster. They label him on there and they go, oh well, 12 inches, and then you ask the people, especially at big chain stores, and they're like, oh, they don't get that big that often. Well, that's not entirely true. This is another fish that lives for years. They can get quite large. When I bought Monstro, he was about, yeah, let's see if I can get, he was about that big. So he's grown quite a bit. I have had him for a couple of years, and he has been in smaller tanks, which has slowed his growth. But since I put him in here, he has gained several inches. So yeah, that's another example of fish that you really need to do your research on them before you get them. You know, guppies and platies are fun, and for the most part, you can do them fine in smaller tanks. For mollies, I wouldn't go smaller than a 29, and for guppies, a 10-gallon should be okay, even a 5-gallon. But you just have to realize with these larger species that they do take extra time. Another thing is the cost of food. Monstro here, I would say that all of my fish in here on a monthly basis, they probably total to about $20 for food for all of my fish in all of my tanks, and I have probably almost 200 altogether. And Monstro in and of himself probably takes or is probably about $5 cost. So of the $20 that I spend for food for fish monthly, he takes up $5 of that, so a quarter of it. And he is getting more and more difficult to feed because I am having to get larger food, which can get expensive. He eats a lot of cucumber and zucchini, as well as algae pellets, and he does share a fairly large tank. The biggest fish after him in here is this angelfish right here. His name's Phylum. So yeah, so that's one thing you guys should expect. Always do your research, because you just never know size of fish and stuff. One other thing, as I show these sharks, these Colombian sharks, in my 29-gallon tank, let me jump over there and I'll show you. Alright, so we're over here at the Golden Molly tank, and continuing our conversation about catfish. There's Pictus right there. Pictus is a catfish. Now, if you were looking for kind of cool looking catfish and stuff, this is an ideal guy. This guy only gets to 6 inches. So for a 29-gallon, maybe a little bit bigger, but 50-gallon or so, he's an excellent fish. Two problems that I have with him right now is, number one, he does not do well alone. He is going to have a couple of companions shortly. He's also a little stressed out, but I think that's just because I turned the lights on. So that's one thing you have to consider, especially with catfish. Catfish tend to get big. Plecos are catfish. The only real exception to them is Corydoras. They tend not to get very big. I think the largest, I own one, and the largest is probably 4 inches, is as big as they get. Let's see if I can jump over to them. Pardon my cloudiness. And this is a really algae-filled tank. Let's see. Oh yeah, they're over in the corner here. So let's see if it'll kind of. All right, you can't really see them. There's one there that I can't remember, and the other one is an emerald green cory, and he's probably about 3 inches. They still get big, but not nearly as big. I think most cories stay under 4 inches. So that's a fish that if you're looking for a catfish and you don't want something that's going to get huge, then that's a good option. Another thing, again, is age. These fish can live for a long time. Guppies, mollies, and platies, they live a year to 5. but a lot of catfish, especially plecos and I can't remember, Colombian catfish, most catfish species get large and they live long. The 3 tank busters that I have will probably live at least 10 years, possibly longer. Monstro is a couple years old, and he hasn't put on a whole lot of size, but since he has been moved to that 50-gallon, he's exploding. There are other options. For example, there are species of plecos. Oh, there he is right there. And you can't really see him because he's in the dark. But there are species of plecos. For example, this clown pleco. Let's see if I can see him. There he is. Let's see if I can zoom in there. They don't get as big. I think they max out at about 4 to 6 inches for clown plecos. Another one that I know doesn't get quite as big as some species of bristlenose. Especially with like plecos where there's lots of different species, you should do your homework. That's the biggest thing. Do your homework and realize that having a pet is a full-time commitment. On average, I probably spend 6 to 8 hours of maintenance on all of these tanks a week, if not more. Every day I check them. I make sure there isn't any sickness in any of the tanks. I make sure there isn't anything that shouldn't be in there. I check the pH parameters, everything once a week on tanks. I clip back plants that are getting too big or have dead on them. It's work. You got to expect that. It's just like taking care of a cat or a dog. Snakes, same thing. You go to the store and you see these little ball pythons or corn snakes and stuff, and they're pretty, yeah, but ball pythons get quite large, like 10 feet or longer. So you just have to realize that when you purchase them. My brother had one. I'm not sure. It might have been a red-tailed boa, but he was about 9 feet long when he had to get rid of him, unfortunately. Not for the reasons that I'm discussing, for other reasons. Actually, I think his is that the person that was selling mice no longer sells them, so he couldn't feed them. So he had to give them to someone who could. So yeah, you guys, you just have to know what you're getting into. Always do your research, because you never know what you're going to run across. Some of the ones in there that they don't really tell you, red-tailed catfish, they get huge, 3 feet or bigger. So those are fish. Just leave them to experts, leave them to people who actually want fish that are that big. What other ones? Arowana. That's another fish that gets really large. You don't see them as much in big retail pet stores. They're a little bit more of a specialty fish. I'm trying to think of other ones that you would see regularly. A lot of catfish. Make sure you're checking on catfish. Plecostomus. Especially avoid common plecos, because they do tend to get larger than some of the other species. I had a high fin pleco that I bought that the research that I did said that would get pretty large. And man, Pictus is real active today. This is a little unusual. But so yeah, you guys just have to know what you're doing. And Pictus is about, I think he's 4 inches now, and they max out about 6 inches, so he's almost full size. And he is a Pictus catfish, which is why I call him Pictus. So you guys just have to know that it's a full-time commitment. It's fun to do. I have a lot of tanks, so it does take me more time. If you had a single tank, depending on the size, you could get away with less maintenance. In all honesty, if you're doing a weekly water change, 25%, for a 29-gallon like this one here, it shouldn't take you more than a half hour, although it depends on what you do. For me, typically I change out the water, put new water in. check to make sure there isn't any loose decorations or any sickness in the fish. You guys look really close. There's babies in there. So, yeah, for the most part, it's not super hard. You just have to realize that, especially some species, they get big, and they have been known to break tanks. Like putting a full-size pleco in here at 2 feet, number one, it's not good for the fish because it's too small of an area for them. And number two, it's such a huge displacement. When I was moving a monster out of his 29 to his 30, he was swimming a little wild and he ran into one glass and you could hear it thump. So imagine that times 10, and you kind of get an idea of why they call them tank busters. So yeah, that's my video for the day. Just been thinking about it a lot today, so figured I'd give you guys a heads up. Just remember, fish tanks are fun, small fish are fun, big fish are fun. Find what you want, and just remember, it's just as much a commitment as a dog or a cat. So, like I said, hope you guys have a good day. Take care of your pets, and we'll see y'all next time.